Close to the Edge on U2X Radio. U2's Edge explores the creative process with musicians, artists and thinkers. Now, Flea gets close to the edge.
Flea, what a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you. This is one of the great privileges of having your own radio channel, is that you actually get a chance to do stuff like this. It's such a thrill. We've known each other for years, but I've never actually had a chance to sit down and talk to you about music and recording and how you got into it and all. So I'm really excited.
Excellent. Yeah. I always think about music education.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different type of education, and the education, particularly in our field, playing rock music, isn't often learning music theory and counterpoint and how an Aeolian mode resolves to a diminished chord within the context of a, you know what I'm talking about. So
I do.
The things that feed us and guide us and all the decisions that we make artistically are so frequently just our life journeys and the camaraderie and the yearning that life creates and how we try to fulfill that yearning with the art that we make. So I love talking about it. It's fascinating to me.
It really is. And yeah, I mean, at what point did you realize that you had the funk?
Well, I remember when I realized that I loved the funk. In terms of like having the funk or being talented or anything like that, I'm not sure if I believe in that concept. Like I feel like sometimes the most non-musical people in the world make the best music because they're forced to come at it from such a strange angle.
I'd agree with that.
And it's like more of a matter of like wanting to do it than having the diligence and the time. And certainly for some people it comes easier. They can feel a rhythm and do it, and it's natural, just the way their nervous system works or whatever, or the natural affinity of their heart. But when I was a kid, I listened to music, I guess, like everybody. I heard what was on the radio and I liked it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was good. I sang along with the Beatles. I like normal kid stuff. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mother left my father. They split up. And my mother took off. And my father, who was, was a very, by all accounts, a pretty square guy, wore a suit, had a briefcase, went away every day. I had no idea what he did. And she remarried or got together with this guy who was a jazz musician. And, my life itself turned upside down because we lived in this suburban house, very nice house, very normal, dinner every night at 7. And then all of a sudden we moved into this jazz musician who had a heroin habit, who lived in his parents' basement, who was a complete mess, and my life turned upside down because all of a sudden I wasn't being watched. I was wild. I was in the street. I was out of control. But he was a jazz musician. And he regularly had his jazz friends over and they would jam out in the living room.
Wow.
Yeah. And playing this was the 60s, late 60s, and playing the hard bebop jazz of that era that all these jazz guys grew up studying. And it's a very sophisticated music. It's a cerebral music, an emotional music, a spiritual music.
And a rhythmic music.
Deeply rhythmic. And I have this thing, and like I have many memories of watching them play. But one profound memory of the first time I saw them do it. They all set up, they're sitting around, I'm what's that smell? Which I ended up learning was weed, and they start playing. And I was like thrown onto the floor, literally, rolling around on the floor, laughing, yelling. Like I just couldn't believe it. It was magical. I didn't know that human beings could do this. The saxophone players are blowing, and my stepdad was an upright bass player, jamming away, drummers booming, piano player vamping. I couldn't believe it. And it was so wild and so free and so beyond my scope of what I knew that I just loved it. And I wanted to start playing trumpet. I got a hold of a trumpet, started playing it. And as I, got into like middle school, 7th grade, I was hearing youth culture music, and I just like jazz. I like Dizzy Gillespie and Lee Morgan and Miles Davis. But I was drawn to funk because it had horns in it.
Right.
And I would hear Parliament Funkadelic and the Ohio Players and the Bar-Kays and all these great funk bands. And I could see a place for me because they had trumpet players.
Ah, right.
Yeah. And I just loved it. I was drawn to it. And I don't know, I mean, we're around the same age, I guess, you know. I'm 58. In my school, in my junior high school, it was like really diverse. And it was like the black kids liked Parliament Funkadelic. The white kids liked Kiss and Led Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, you know, what it was. And I just always went with the black kids. You know, I like the funk. I like the funk. And beyond like just the horn thing, it just resonated with me, you know, like, and then when I started, you know, when I ended up being in a rock band and playing bass, it was just the natural thing for me to do was to play funk.
I share that love. The funny thing about me is, although it doesn't come out in YouTube music very often, I love rhythmic music and funk music. And some of those bass players, I'm sure the ones that you were inspired by, I'm so kind of such a huge fan of, you know, those guys like Larry Graham, you know, who played with Sly. That song, simple song. I learned that age 16 on the guitar just because it blew my mind when I heard that groove. So I share that. I really share that. And I think the other thing that I share with you, and maybe it's more universal. I was reading your book, which by the way is a fantastic book. If anyone out there wants to read an amazing book about music, then pick up Flea's book. It's really a beautiful piece of work. You were talking about the kind of funny awkwardness and isolation and sort of inner uncertainty, which music in some ways solves. So what people often don't realize is their heroes in music often turn to music not because they feel heroic or complete, but for the opposite reason, that music actually completes them. Music is the thing that is their salve and their salvation. So I found that really inspiring. And I love the fact that you sort of put that in your book, because I think it's a really important message right now. So when you first got into your first band, was that kind of, you were on this journey and it was like you two, you guys met in high school. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Fairfax?
Yeah. When we were 15, Anthony and I met. And just to follow back to what you said in the beginning about loving Sly and stuff, I wouldn't say that you don't have funk in your music. I would think that's not true. You do. And I've always loved your guitar playing so much, and you come at it from such a unique place. And when you're playing the type of melodies and the type of rhythmic phrases that you play, it was always clear to me that it's informed by all kinds of music. It's not like you were like, well, I just like post-punk English music. I like Joy Division and Susie or whatever. It was clear that your music is steeped in history of all kinds of music, as well as being forward-looking and charting your own path through your own, life. So I felt the need to say that. Yeah,
Thanks,
of course. But music for me, and still is, in a world full of human beings that can feel so cruel and hypocritical and selfish, music has always been the sane thing for me. It's been a place of a sanctuary, a place of sanity, a place where like the core spiritual principles that I want to live my life by are enacted regularly. A place where you can feel that that we all are one, that we all are connected. And even beyond our politics, beyond all of the polarizing things that we live with each day, there's a humanness to it. And that it's always capable through the arts, and really through anything, but through the arts most evidently to me, that we can build bridges of love and connect to one another in ways that can be life-changing, and much more life-changing than the ways that are more tangible and evident, like politics or activism even. For me, the arts are the most profound way for change, and have made the most change throughout human history.
I agree. You traveled around quite a bit as a kid. What did you learn, or what do you think you were exposed to that helped you because of traveling and being exposed to different cultures? And
yeah, well, mostly the traveling really came as I got older and started being in a band. I mean, I was born in Australia. When I was 4, I went to New York. When I was 11, I came to LA. I've been in LA ever since. But traveling around, like a few things really gave me a sense of like a universal feeling of human beings. And maybe this is the same for you. I don't know your childhood, but I don't think that you grew up a rich kid.
No.
Yeah. And I definitely did not. We didn't starve.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But we just got by.
Yeah.
And I always, growing up, had a resentment against rich people.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, they think they know everything. It's like a poor kid's thing, fuck the rich, eat the rich. But as I grow up and I ended up making money, and maybe this is rationalizing my own shame for making money. I'm joking. But like, there's a couple of things I learned, that soulful people and non-soulful people, kind people and cruel people, people that know that we're all connected and people that don't, it knows no economic boundaries. It knows no ethnic boundaries. It knows no racial boundaries or religious boundaries. Everywhere I go, and I've gone lots of places, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Sweden, Chile. I travel all over the world, as you do. I find an equal amount of nice people and assholes everywhere I go, And I've met many poor people that are selfish, self-righteous twats. And I've met many rich people that are selfish, self-righteous twats. And I've met many rich people that are kind, caring, philanthropic people who want to use the energy of their money to help the world. And likewise in every other way. And I've met the most selfish, evil fucking people you can imagine,
Yeah.
But in travels, when you ask me that question, that's what I think of, like as time goes by. And I just feel like it's like the core universal truth is that without light, there is not dark. And that truth extends everywhere. There's always equal parts of good and evil and light and dark and truth and falsehood.
You seem, of all the people who I've spent time with who are from very successful bands, you seem to have survived that success really well, maybe better than anyone I've met. How did you survive success? I'm thinking of the Billie Eilish song, when she had a dream, she got everything she wanted. And, that to her, even now, she's got enough wisdom to understand that's a bit of a nightmare, or can be, but not in your case.
Well, it has been. I mean, there were times for me, I think sometimes like the damage that I might have from it in terms of my ego and all of that stuff, I think if we do have that kind of damage, we don't see it. That's why it's damage, If I do see it, I don't turn a blind eye to it. I confront it and do my best to like check myself.
Right.
But for me, the thing that I've always held on to is it's the music that's everything.
Right.
Like the music is the divine voice. And when I'm always yearning for that and knowing my place in this like infinite hierarchy of music and what's capable, and like musicians I know that have been able to articulate their feelings so much more profoundly than me, I'm humbled. I'm a student.
So your version of a higher power is kind of just music and creativity and...
Yeah. I do believe in God,
Right.
I'm a guy that gets up every morning and prays, and I'm not religious, but
Right.
I do believe in a divine intelligence. I don't claim to know anything, but
Right.
it makes sense to me. Yeah. It could be that it's because I find, great comfort there, but I do see a lot of hypocrisy in most religions,
Yeah.
But yeah, music, John Coltrane existed, Billie Holiday existed, Igor Stravinsky and Bach and Mozart existed. Like, I'm so humble, I
Right.
just want to be better. And I'm always trying and yearning and trying to be better and working on it, After we finish this today, I'm going to go sit in my room and try to write, good horn arrangements for this new Chili Pepper record. And, there's so many great horn arrangers, and here I am, this little bumbling fool trying to come up with something. So,
I'm with you there, though. I think limitations can create wonderful results. I think putting yourself out of your comfort zone, that to me is an important part of the creative process. If you always just do the easy things, you kind of end up making music that sounds easy, which is the least interesting music.
Yeah. Or like the motivation behind it, doing the thing that you can already do.
Yeah.
If you're not reaching, I think for most artists, when they do their best work, it's when they're figuring it out. And in the process of trying to do it, you're trying so hard, you're reaching to like, let me just make a good fucking song, something that sounds like the world that I see. And that's when it happens. So it's possible to stay eternally in that state of wonder and that awe-stricken feeling of the thing itself. Like, you remember when you're young and you first go in the studio and you went and played something that was good and you go back into the control room and you listen to it and it just exists, you know, like, and you can't even believe it. Like, we did this, like, this is us. You hear these big speakers in the control room, and it's like, you know, shockingly uplifting. You know, like this invisible thing turned into a tangible thing, and people are going to go hold a record in their hands and hear it.
Yeah, I know. It's such a thrill. It's why I could not conceive of doing anything else other than music. Is where would you get that?
Yeah, I don't. Sometimes I mean, I know like everybody has their things, but I can't imagine not being able to just walk into a room and sit down at the piano or pick up any instrument and make a sound on it. Like, what do you do with your time? You know?
I know. Yeah, if you're a songwriter, if you're a musician, you never really have any time off. I mean, you can take time doing other things, but I'm never bored, because if I have a minute, I will go and find a guitar or do something. So it's like music becomes the constant part of just breathing. It's like it's there with you all the time.
Yeah. I love seeing other musicians evolve and change and grow, not just in, you know, their ability to play, but in their, you know, lyrical concepts, their worldview. Like Nick Cave and Warren Ellis just put out this new record called Carnage. I don't know if you've heard it, or if you're a Nick Cave fan. I
am a huge Nick Cave fan. I must check it out. I haven't.
Yeah, me too. And it's such a beautiful record. Oh, you got to hear it. And it starts off, and, you know, everything that Nick Cave has made since his son died, I always feel, you know, dealing with this grief, this enormous grief. It's human feeling of making sense of this pain, you know, and I can't even imagine it, you know, but I've always been such a big fan of his. And then to see him evolve through this, you know, this challenge and this understanding and this love, you know, this like the deepest, like how bigger can a love be than for your child, you know, and to see him go with love, with this river of fucking love, and for it to carry him and to him to let it carry him. It's so beautiful, and this record is really something. And Warren Ellis is a, you know, great musician, and I really recommend that new album.
I'll check it out. Yeah, I think music, of all the art forms, I think it's the one that can come closest to expressing the inexpressible, to actually try and look into the abyss and kind of have something to say about it all. I think other artists are in that way kind of jealous of musicians and composers, because it is almost like it's got a direct connection to the listener on an emotional level, intellectual level. It's got that power when it works. And of course, that's why you and I are sort of doing what we do and looking for clues. And I think you expressed it earlier, that this sort of, you can't believe when something good has happened, because it is a little bit of a miracle. It's kind of the mystery of how something that's so collaborative and so much about individuals working with one another that can suddenly create this single expression, you know, different tensions. And I know you've worked with some great people over the years, and I realized you just did the album with Danger Mouse. How was that?
You worked with him too.
Yeah, we did.
It was really different for us, that experience. We've always, like every record we've made, we go into a room, we all play live, roll tape, lay it down. And then we'll overdub it, of course, and, you know, add stuff. But the main core of it is us playing live in a room. And it's, you know, really not the way that Danger Mouse works. You know, he's always pieced tracks together bit by bit and composed that way. And, you know, we did some songs like that with him, and it was good. It was really productive, and I liked the record that we made. But I missed that, the humanness of us all playing together in a room. And maybe it's like a part of me that's sort of proud of that, you know? Yeah. There's a pride and sort of a, like, in a lot of ways, you know, I guess with rock bands in general, but with recording in that way, kind of like Last Man Standing. Yeah. You know, because people just, especially like in youth culture music, just aren't doing it anymore. You know,
but I think it has a different sound. I mean, I call it music made in real time. When you hear musicians playing against each other, you instinctively know that that's how that record was made. Even in the tightest funk. And they did an interesting thing recently with the John Bonham drum track, where they took the drums from a really famous Zeppelin song and they played the track, and it had so much swing. It was amazing. But when you looked at it and you checked it for accuracy, it wasn't accurate at all. It was all over the place. So then they took that drum track and they did a thing we musicians know called quantizing, which is basically you put it on a grid. So every single drum hit arrives exactly in time according to the math of music. And they played that track back and it just had no personality, no swing. It had the personality of a mannequin doll compared to a real beautiful girl. And it was lifeless. And it just showed me that, wow, we do need to continue with this idea of music made in real time, musicians playing off each other, because if that's lost, I think it's really, we will look back in decades and go, whoa, what happened to music? Music that was suddenly just made within the software realm, which I do love. A lot of that music, by the way, I'm not in any way saying it's not good music, but I think the two aren't mutually exclusive. And the thing of people playing in the room together is so important. And it has been the hallmark of great music, and particularly great jazz music and rock and roll since the beginning. So I agree with you. We can't allow that to go. And it's going to have a resurgence. I think that sound, that feel, people are going to really be looking out for it.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think it will ever go away. And I think as technology gets more advanced, still, the idea of someone just sitting down and blowing a horn or hitting on a drum or doing whatever, getting on a stage and touching people's hearts will always have a profound effect and a human effect that is undeniable. And that said, like you, I love electronic music, from Kraftwerk to Aphex Twin to, DaBaby. I love electronic music. I love hip hop. I love avant-garde, weird, underground electronic music. Love it. It's an art form. And great drum programmers know how to make something swing in a new way that a drummer can't do because it's not humanly possible to do it. Or maybe some drummers are so great. There are this kind of new breed of drummers that grew up listening to drum machines that play different. There's guys around that have this especially funk and jazz drummers that grew up listening to hip hop and electronic music that have these new beats and the technical ability to play this wild shit that's really exciting, So it all works together. But something about in rock music, that interaction and the mistakes and the way that things lean against one another form a paragon of goodness.
I know. The least interesting thing is perfection. That's just, you find that out very quickly.
And you learn, you learn.
Yeah.
You have to learn, that feel is everything.
Yeah.
And for no matter what music you're playing. One thing I learned, when I was in my late 40s, I never went to college. I just got on the road when I was a teenager, started playing shows. But I went to university for a year, and when I was 46, and studied music. I went and studied theory and composition and stuff, and because I didn't know anything about music academically. Very little. When I was a trumpet player as a kid, I started learning the basics, and then punk rock happened, and all went out the window. But the learning was great. Then it gave me more colors to paint with. But what I was going to say was the feel with orchestral music. Talking about feel with electronic music or with John Bonham's imperfections and that whole, what's that, wabi-sabi, the Japanese art of imperfection, which is a beautiful concept, which is really relatable. But I learned how much a conductor, one conductor will conduct a Beethoven symphony, a different conductor will conduct it, and they'll sound completely different. The guy's really a remixer, in terms of tempos of different sections and levels of all the instruments, and what he's doing can make things sound completely different. And that's all about feel as well. So a conductor's got to have great feel to use this super dynamic instrument, which might be an 80-piece orchestra.
Like you, I never studied music theory as a kid. I had piano lessons when I was 9, 10 years old, and then a couple of classical guitar lessons when I was 14, but I couldn't stick with it. I sort of have a bit of a dyslexia and ADD, so I would sort of blank when it came to, if people put a manuscript in front of me, I just wasn't interested. So I learned all my music by ear. So it sounds like you. So the classical stuff is really interesting to me from almost just being a fan. I don't really understand how that conductor thing works, because my thing is, well, hold on, you're reading the manuscript. How can you simultaneously look at a conductor if you're trying to read your score? But I'm always blown away by their accuracy. Like an orchestra, if it's a good orchestra, it's like they are bang on time with no reference.
Well, but they are looking at the conductor, and he's changing the way that it's played.
Yeah.
You know, something that could be like, bop, 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 bop. He's making like babu, 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 like there's all sorts of different ways that he'll tell them how to play.
Right.
And for me, visually too, like seeing an orchestra when all their arms are bowing in unison, just watching it move the way it moves, I love it. I love going.
It's like a flock of starlings, you know. The way
yeah. I saw that on the beach yesterday in Malibu.
Right.
I was with my dogs on the beach, and it's, it's like 500 birds all moving in one big formation, like just right next to each other, like they're almost touching, flapping
and you don't
furiously.
Know. It's not obvious who's leading or why they make that turn. It just they do it, and that to me is the mystery of orchestra music. Yeah. But on the other end of that scale, I know you've spent a lot of time in Africa, and that's something I have this visceral connection with Africa, which I can't even begin to explain. But it's almost like every cell in my body is telling me that I have come home in some weird way. But you tell us about Africa and what you were up to there.
Well, I'd always wanted to go to Africa. When I was, it was like in the 80s, I played with this guy called James Chance.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever hear the Contortions or James Chance, James White and the Blacks?
James White and the Blacks. I have all those vinyls.
Okay, yeah. I played bass with him for a little while in the 80s. And the crazy thing is he also played with my dad, my stepdad.
No way.
Yeah.
He was on Z Records. That was a little like, we know the Michael Zilka who ran Z Records and owns Z.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and he was wild, And once again, like as a horn player, I really loved him because he played a horn, but he was involved in the zeitgeist of that whole, the New York, like kind of arty, underground, punk rock, noise, No New York. I don't know if you know that record, that scene, and he was so exciting. And I was playing with him. I could tell you some great stories about that because he was a true, wild, untethered, wild man, as well as an intellectual, a great musician. But he turned me on to Fela. Yeah. And this was in like 85, 86. Right. And then I met this guy who had played with Fela. And he said, yeah, I just went to Nigeria and showed up and knocked on his door and was like, hey, I'm from wherever he was from. I'm from, Cleveland, and I play saxophone, and I'd love to jam with you guys. And he went in, started playing at the Shrine every night with Fela,
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. And so I always had this dream to do that because I loved Fela so much. And I got invited by Damon Albarn. He had organized a thing called African Express to just basically take a group of musicians to different places in Africa and play with Africans. And, it's kind of like a musical field trip, cultural exchange, get together thing. It was just a great idea, really simple, really good. He was kind of responding, obviously I can't speak for him, but he was kind of responding to, like they had all those like USA for Africa concerts, whatever it was. And he was like, well, there's these big things and there's no Africans. You know what I mean? It's all these like, big American and Western artists and no Africans. And he was like, let's do something. It's not just simple and, get together with Africans. So I did that with him twice. I went to Nigeria with him and I went with him to Ethiopia. And both of them were just incredible, beautiful experiences for me. And I can't wait to get back. And I met so many different African musicians and played with so many different African musicians from Ghana, from Mali, from Sierra Leone, from South Africa, from Nigeria. And it's kind of like, I don't know, man. A lot of ways I feel like Africa is the future. Like it's so wide open artistically and there's so much intelligence and it's so exciting. I really love it there. And actually my wife has family in Uganda. My wife is Persian and part of her Persian family lives in Uganda. So as soon as the pandemic ends, we're going to go there. And,
very cool. Yeah, my experiences musically in Africa would be mostly North Africa. But what I sense is that in terms of rhythm, what we got in the West was kind of a little Polaroid snapshot of a whole world of rhythm that exists in Africa, and that, you know, our kind of swing sensibility, which came out of New Orleans, was mostly West African, sort of Mali, that area. But then you go to other parts of Africa, there's a completely different rhythmic sensibility. And there was one funny incident where we're in Fez in Morocco. We're set up, we're recording with Brian Eno and Danny Lanois. And we're all staying in this little riad, which is in the center is like this little, I guess it's a kind of courtyard open to the sky, and the building is built around it, goes up 3 floors. So we're having some food, and the owner of the riad has, as a treat, he's brought in this group from Morocco, from the Atlas Mountains, and they come in and they start playing for us, which was fantastic, and we're really getting into it. So slowly,
was it the Master Magicians of Jujuka?
It was, I don't think it was them, but it was from that area. It's that sort of trance music thing. So we pick up our instruments and we start slowly, tentatively, respectfully joining in. And as we get louder and more part of the blend, you just start to see this look of utter confusion coming over the faces of these musicians as they realize that we're hearing the downbeat in a completely different way, and the emphasis is completely different. And the groove, we were like doing our best to be part of the groove that they'd set up. Utterly different rhythmic language. And we slowly, sort of quietly stopped playing and let them do it. And it's amazing how we were hearing it and how they were hearing it.
And both things are foreign to one another. You know, it's funny because when I went to Nigeria, I knew the Afrobeat music really well. And there was a lot of Nigerian hip hop. I jammed with those guys and fell right in. And I was just in heaven. Then when I went to Ethiopia and played with these Ethiopian musicians, the rhythm was, I didn't understand it. It was completely different. And I remember one night going to see this band at a nightclub in Addis Ababa. And this band was incredible. Man, they were so good. And I was trying to figure it out. Like, what are they doing? Right, and I'm trying to count. I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, like trying to understand what it was. I don't know, it was like 12/8 or so. I don't know what it was. But I was trying to like cerebrally count it to understand it. And it seems so strange to me. Yet in this room full of people dancing, a bunch of Ethiopian people like dancing, because they're just easily swaying to the music, happy as, you know what I mean? Completely natural to this rhythm to me that was, you know, so foreign.
Yeah.
And it was once I kind of let go of my cerebrally trying to understand it and just went like dance with the people, then I started to understand it. You know, I could free my mind, my ass would follow, you know, or free my ass, my mind would follow, whatever the way. But it's fantastic, all the different rhythms. And there's so much to learn, Edge. Like, there's so much for us out there, and our life is too short. We got to keep looking and hearing and going for it.
Being curious is the first thing, and humble enough to go, you know, we're students. I really feel like a student. I'm excited every time I go to a piano or guitar that I'm going to discover something new. And we played with Fela once. He came on the Conspiracy of Hope tour, which was an Amnesty International thing we did just before we recorded the Joshua Tree. And he was in jail, as often happens if you're as popular as Fela was and have a political instinct. You can get in trouble very easily. So Bobby Wine in Uganda is actually one of those guys right now, and that's something I'm very concerned. Bobby Wine is this politician from Uganda who's sort of the opposition to the regime that's in power at the moment. I'll send you some stuff, but he and his followers are being very seriously persecuted at the moment because they are the opposition, and it's not a great situation. But we managed to get Fela out of jail for the final show of the Conspiracy of Hope tour, and he came to New York to Giant Stadium and he played with his whole band. So that was one of the great triumphs of that tour. And wow, when you see that band with all the horns and everything, I mean, it's one of the most infectious sounds you will ever come across.
So good.
Yeah.
So great. I saw him, like he had been in jail for a while, and I saw him play in LA, you know, like at the Olympic Auditorium, which is basically just a boxing arena, you know, and unbelievably good. I saw him a number of times and toured with his son, with Femi. Like he came out and toured with the Chili Peppers, but that's so cool. You shared the stage with Femi.
Yeah. I mean, what an honor. It struck me that Chili Peppers and U2 had a parallel existence in music, you know, over the years, and totally different, totally unique relative to one another. But you guys are different from us in one way, which is that we are the same guys that started out. You had to deal with some pretty tragic losses early on, and you're more stable these days by far than you were early on. I'm just interested in that. That must have been hard. Did you at that point feel like the group was over?
Well, I guess are you talking about when Hillel died, our original guitar player? Yeah. I don't think I ever thought that it would end. I was just shocked and grieving. I still grieve every day.
Because you were in high school with him, right?
Yeah, he's the one that asked me to start playing bass.
Wow, right.
Because I was going to be a jazz trumpet player, and he was like, start playing bass and join our rock band. And 2 weeks later, I was on stage playing bass at the Troubadour in Hollywood at a battle of the bands.
That's pretty impressive, Flea.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, boom, 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 But, people, and I'm sure that you get this question a lot too, like, how do you stay together for so long?
Well, yeah, that's what we get.
Yeah, and we get it too, even though it's different. Our togetherness is different because we've exchanged members a number of times. And I don't know the answer. It just always seems like the right thing to do.
Right.
Hillel died, and we were devastated and shocked. And, Anthony and I were just like, let's keep doing it. And that's what we did. And we've been in various situations throughout our career. John Frusciante coming became the guy that Anthony and I have a something from the way that we grew up. Running it from when we were kids, running around on the street together, being bad kids, getting in trouble, drugs, petty crimes. We were a mess. We were like most likely to end up in jail or dead. That was how we were. And hustling, like, how do we get food today? That type of thing. And there's something that's so irreplaceable about that. I think it's sort of like, in a lot of ways, that's kind of been the foundation of the band, that relationship between he and I. But with John coming to the band, and, of course, as time goes by, all the experience we have with him as well, but he has the ability, the diligence, the intellect, the ability as a musician to lift us up and articulate the thing that we are musically in a much higher level than we're able to do without him. And he's really something, that guy, as a musician.
I love his playing. He's absolutely stunning guitar player. As a rhythm player, I can really relate to what he does is so hard. His
scope is large, his references are many, and his ability to just stay focused on something for a long period of time. And like you mentioned before that you get restless. I get really restless. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I can't, like a couple hours sitting still thinking about something, my mind wanders. I run off. John is so capable of such remarkable focus for a long period of time, and to keep expanding and growing and refining and honing in on the music that he makes, that he's incredible. So he's come and left, he joined us, quit, came back, quit again, and now he's come back again.
I'm so happy he's back again. I mean, what a great combination you guys are.
Thank you. It's really good. And I wonder, I was kind of thinking about this question earlier. And also, like, going about John, it's not to discount anyone else playing with us, like Josh Klinghoffer, who played with us for 10 years, is a fantastic musician, and also, like, incredible in his own right. But I sometimes like languages that you establish with someone, you can't just create those, and, reference points and history and all that stuff. And we have that with John in such a fluid and organic way that it was right for him to come back. So I don't mean to to be dismissive of Josh at all.
And probably Halal's gift to you, his kind of passing gift.
Absolutely. Like Halal's, every note I play is informed by what I did with Halal. Like he and I sitting in a room playing together. But what I was going to ask is like something I think about with our band, and it's really evident to me right now, and it's always been this way. With our lineup of me and Anthony and Chad and John, we are all such different people. Like we disagree all the time. We all bring something completely different to the equation. But it's the four pieces when they come together, they can't be replaced. Like that thing. I mean, obviously, we go on, we play with different guitar player, but that thing, what makes it so powerful is that everybody is completely different and brings an entirely different attribute to the party.
Yep, I relate.
And it's difficult sometimes because you're like, no, I you see it differently. They look at it and they're looking at it, seeing something completely different. Like, that's blue. And like, no, that's purple. You know what I mean? Like, and you have to be, okay, so now we get blue and purple out of one thing. Instead of fighting about it, when you realize the power of the differences, as much as it might be rough on your ego at the moment, that's where the strength is, in that unity of all the differences. And I wonder if you feel that as well with your band.
Yeah, I mean, we've always played together since 1980. It's the same lineup. So it's a challenge at times to keep it fresh because, as I was saying, if you stay in your comfort zone, it tends to promote music that is predictable and more kind of lacking in imagination. So we have to keep tricking ourselves and finding ways to reinvigorate the process. But I think for sure, and this is something we really explored a lot with Brian Eno, is the importance of our limitations. How crucial it is to work within the frame that you've been given and to see that as not something that is detrimental to your music or your process, but actually something that gives you a unique quality that no other set of musicians will have. So I would say that over the years, as much as we constantly try and find ways to inspire each other and inspire the process, but often it's like recording in an exotic place or getting out of a studio, getting into a house, inviting our producers to pick up an instrument or swap instruments or whatever it is that's going to just give us a different starting point. Those limitations in the end are kind of the key thing. And without those, I mean, if you could do everything, what would you do?
Yeah.
And, like you, none of us are trained musicians, and we kind of learned how to do what we do by playing with each other. Sort of our music academy has been you too over the years.
Yeah. And
even to the point now I'm sort of going back and sort of analyzing what we did a bit more with a slightly more informed view to see what it was we were up to and how we did it. Some of it's really out there. And at the time it felt totally natural, but actually it's, from a musical standpoint, it's very strange what we did at times. Anyway, all to say, that's the magic of a band, and when a band works, when that chemistry creates something of interest, it's because of those tensions, because of those sort of inner contradictions or things that don't quite line up. I think the intrigue of something that's got tension is way more interesting than things that are perfectly aligned and everyone's pulling in exactly the same way in the same direction.
Yeah. And I think this might be the case for any band that has gotten really popular, and I could be wrong, it might be totally different for you. But do you ever find yourself struggling with feeling like you have to live up to something? Like, like when you first, you start making records, and you guys became commercially successful long before us. It wasn't until our fourth or fifth record that we started having hit songs and being on the radio and selling millions of records and stuff. But when that happened, all of a sudden you sell 15 million records, and it's so exciting and strange, and your ego, your everything, all of a sudden people treat you differently. You're accepted in all these places where you wouldn't have been accepted before. You're, doors open everywhere. Like we talked about this a little bit earlier about whether, how to be affected by that or not. But what's really like outside of like personal mental health and remaining humble and remaining a student of all those things, purely creatively, like
Yeah.
to not let that interfere with the creative process of feeling like, okay, we need to make a record that, and even if you don't say it, you know what I mean? That's gonna get on the radio, that everyone's gonna love, that's gonna sell 80 million copies, that's gonna be the biggest, work at a mighty great band. You know what I mean? Like in one way is great because yes, you want to fucking be mighty and be the most powerful thing you can be and touch as many hearts with this message that you believe in, this poignant, beautiful thing. But if you're worried about how many records you're going to sell, and it's like you're sitting there getting ready to put some chords together and thinking, hold on, wait, let me go check on 50 million people, see if they like it first before I try this C minor.
Yeah,
it's
death. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the only things that we would allow to influence our thinking would be sort of intense self-criticism of the work as songs, in the kind of sense that having written some powerful songs, you kind of know what a powerful song is. And, being around as long as we have and knowing the great body of work that's out there of beautiful, wonderful songs, that also informs you. So we never want to be lazy and self-indulgent and go, that's kind of what we woke up this morning thinking was great, so that's what we're going to put out. We're always like, no, we beat ourselves up and beat up the material. Is that a great song? If it's not a great song or a great piece of music, what is its excuse for existing in the world? So that's one thing. So we're quite tough on ourselves in that regard. And then the only other thing I think we would occasionally ask ourselves is, how is this going to be in front of a U2 audience at a show? Because again, it's one of our great privileges is having a back catalogue of a lot of albums and a lot of songs that work very well in front of an audience. So it's hard for us almost to add new songs into our set list because they have to compete. It's like you're not going to play the new album because you think it's cool. It has to stand up against your best work in a live context. So those two things we would allow in, but never, how's this going to go on radio, or is this going to sell, or anything like that? Because I think then you're no longer really writing from a free place. You're writing from a very commercially minded place. And I think music that's written with that being the imperative, it's just never interesting. It's always going to be a kind of pale imitation of something else on radio, let's do one. We've never done that. Let's do one like that hit that's just happened. We're almost always looking for the counterculture thing that's about to happen, because that's kind of where turns it fun.
Yeah. And I think for us, we're always thinking just, you feel it when the river's flowing, you feel it, and get in there and go with it. And, for me, it's like I have the drool test. If I'm playing or writing, sitting at the piano or the bass or whatever I'm playing, if I start drooling, it's good.
I love it. Well,
when I'm getting to a place beyond thought is really what I mean. Like I'm not trying to piece something together. Something is piecing me together.
You're kind of chasing it. It's not chasing you. It's, as Jimmy Iovine would say, and Robbie Robertson talks about, getting clues. It's like being a bloodhound. There's something amazing at the end of this trail. Yeah. You just want to get there as quickly as possible and kind of keep your fingerprints off it as much as possible. Let it be pure. Let it just be itself.
It's the thought that I always have, and more recently that I've been able to understand it, but it's just get myself out of the way, let the beautiful stuff come through.
Yeah, and sometimes that's I often instigate U2 songs, so I will arrive with something. It may not be finished. It may have like a placeholder top line melody, or it's recorded in a very basic way. But it's also at that moment, the challenge is to either you're going to protect your vision and go, no, that's not how I hear it. I want you to do this. Or what I've learned over the years to do is just give it up and surrender it and just see where it goes. If you just have no kind of take no responsibility for your way of seeing it and hearing it, but just allow it to just live and breathe on its own. And it's amazing where things will go. If you have the kind of confidence to just go, hey guys, do something with this and see what happens.
And the other guys feel more empowered when they have that freedom, and you're going to get the best out of them.
Then my job becomes about just inspiring people to be great. That's the best job in the world. What an absolute pleasure it's been. And, you know, if I can ever reciprocate, just let me know. But it's been so much fun to talk to you. And I think we covered a lot of interesting stuff. Yeah,
it's really nice to talk.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you soon. And
thank you.
Take care, man.
God bless. And love to all your family.
Likewise.
Bye.
Close to the edge. Close to the edge. With musicians, artists and thinkers in revealing conversation with U2's Edge. Listen for new episodes every month
on U2X Radio
and the SiriusXM app. Just search Edge.